Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Spence Witten. He is principal at 38 North Security. Welcome, Spence.
Hey, Pete. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career?
Yeah, so I kind of stumbled into this career by accident. So I will admit to being a terrible student in high school, kind of lucked into college, made it work. And I was working as a venture capital consultant around 2008. So you can guess how that ended, seeing as it was 2008. And I found myself unemployed, right? And the only sector of the economy that wasn't a complete dumpster fire was federal cybersecurity. And I knew absolutely nothing about cybersecurity. In fact, when I had thrown a resume out on monster.com and I had gotten, if you remember that, and I had gotten a hit from the cybersecurity company, and I asked them what they did, and they described it, and it sounded like the most boring thing on the planet. So I ignored it, right? And so 2 or 3 weeks went by. It was like a slow day on the job boards, and I picked up this old, inquiry I had, and I was like, yeah, I'm still employed. Like, is this job still available? And they were like, yeah, come in, and like the rest is history. So I started in a role that was suited to my venture capital background. So I was sort of in like a investor liaison, market research search type position. But it was at a small company, and we started winning new business. And long story short, I had to pick up some cyber skills and started a little bit of signature writing for malware detection signatures. Did some compliance work. Worked in a little security operations center, and then that's kind of how I got started in the industry. It's unfortunately not a path that really exists for folks today, which we'll talk about when we get to talent development. I don't think people stumble into the career by accident, but I'm really grateful I did. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, great background there for sure. So what about the talent gap broadly in the industry? Do you think that's a real thing, or has it been manufactured? I guess if it is real, what would you say it looks like?
Yeah, so there's two different ways to look at it, right? So there's the people that we're hiring today. There's the number, like how many people are being hired into cyber roles, and then there's how many people we really need, right? And I think that those are two different questions, right? We're clearly not hiring enough cybersecurity people. I believe it's Thad Whitaker had a great ratio for how many cyber professionals an organization needs. And so he recommends 1 to 40, right? So for every, you need one cybersecurity person for every 40 employees you have. And like, he's done some great work backing up that ratio. He's got a few other ratios that for less sensitive organizations, and then obviously more secure organizations with more security needs more. And so when you calculate out by using that, I think we're about 300 to 400,000 people short, right, of where we really need to be to have us properly staffed for security across the United States. As for what types of people, as for the hiring that's actually happened, like we're nowhere near that. Like security teams aren't staffed to that ratio. So if you look at it from how many people we need, yeah, we're short, right? If you look at it from how many people we're actually hiring, it gets murky, right? So there are a lot of job postings out there, but we've all commented on the unicorn problem, right? They're all looking for people who just don't exist, millions of years in experience and tools that have only been around for a handful of years, right? And I think that's a different problem. So the current talent gap, unfortunately, trends senior. Like we only want to hire senior people, and there's various different ways to look at the numbers that stack that up, and you can see that in action. But it does. So to sum up, right? There is a talent gap. It's just it's not the right type of talent for what people are actually hiring, or definitely not hiring enough people that we actually need to meet our security goals across the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think when people analyze like the old statistic by ISC2, IC squared, whatever you want to call them, they're looking, when you look at those numbers, it's more like projected shortfall of, like basically we could use more people. So every security department out there could use more people, could use more resources, could use more headcount. But the question is what roles are actually being funded and actually being hired for. And that number, I think, is far, far smaller than the hypothetical, hey, we could use X number of bodies as well. What about the skill sets? Like, where do you think that we don't have enough people relative to the skill sets being demanded?
Yeah, so we don't, truthfully, we definitely don't have enough product security people, right? So product security is really hard. And so that's where the people who understand both software and infrastructure would work at like a major SaaS provider or a small SaaS provider, doesn't matter, and understand how to secure the code and also secure the infrastructure that that code relies on, right? It's very difficult operationally to split that into two people. They tend to start speaking different languages. Really good product security people know the software side and they know the product side. So like if I at the senior level, we're trying to build my skills, like that's where it would be, right? It wouldn't be advanced blue teaming. It wouldn't be penetration testing or offensive security. Like I would be trying to become a great product security people. The pay is great. There is genuine demand for these folks in organizations. Nobody wants to hire, poor junior folks out of college for entry level SaaS or SOC positions. They should. We can get to that, but they really want these people that they can slot into an organization that speak infrastructure, that speak software, that are tech native, cloud native, and can really help to harden products, because that's a hard job and it requires fluency in many different aspects of security. So like there's a genuine need for people like that. On the compliance side, there's a huge need for CMMC folks, right? So that is exploding. Like the Department of Defense makes it arbitrarily hard to become a CMMC assessor. Like it'd be nice if we had on-ramps to bring in junior people that were overseen by some of the qualified assessors, but the industry is desperate for people who know CMMC. There's a huge backlog of assessments. So, DoD security is thriving. I believe the feds are hiring again. I saw some Fed initiative recently that I didn't dig into it, but I saw it bounce it around on LinkedIn to bring up to bring up the federal workforce after we've, fired a bunch of people. So here we are, we're going to hire a bunch of people again. And federal security is an interesting blend of skills on the compliance and technical side. So there are bright spots, right? What's not a bright spot is traditional entry level roles, right? And AI is definitely making it worse because, I kind of got my start in security doing, combination of signature writing and then like policy development, right? But were both pretty simple tasks that were easy to farm off to a cheap junior because I made nothing. Like it was super cheap to have me go do those things, and that pathway doesn't exist, right? A lot of that work is getting offloaded to AI, which is just sad. But there are bright spots. So if you're looking for a cyber job, if you're let's say, one of a great DevOps person that was recently laid off and you're thinking you want to break into security, like there's still great demand for security people. So like if I had a DevOps background and I was unemployed because of all these tech layoffs, like I would be probably trying to rebrand myself as a product security expert because that's the perfect skill set for it. And, there's still demand for those folks. If I was government focused, I would be really looking at DoD and Fed Civil, but in kind of bread and butter positions where we brought juniors up through the ranks before, it's just sadly, it just doesn't seem like there's much demand for those skills. There should be. We need that pipeline, but there just isn't the demand.
Right. So what's the business case to be made there to build that pipeline? Basically the way I see it is like everybody's saying it's not my problem. In my particular case, I can only afford to hire senior people. We don't have the resources or headcount or whatever to build an entry-level training program. But if everybody says that, then it becomes everybody's problem. So on an individual company or hiring team level, what's the business case, do you think?
So I think it's two cases. There's two answers to that, right? And one is not business, it's personal. And there are people who embody this. So it's not like some pie in the sky thing. So as security leaders, we've been around long enough in the industry. Talent development should be something that we all care about. And I know a lot of people who don't. There's a lot of people who say that's too fluffy. But then there are plenty of great CISOs and great consultants and great security operations center leaders who take this personally, right? They understand that there's a wave of retirements. A lot of us are getting older. We're not going to be around forever, and that we have not only do we have a gap in the number of people we need, we're going to be losing great people soon, and that we have to build that. And then there's a lot of people who just generally like building up the next generation, right? That they get a great deal of satisfaction out of that. And so I would encourage people, if you have that inkling, like lean into that, like embrace that, like don't set aside the business case for a while and just drive it because it's the right thing to do, and it feels good to build up the next generation. We all know we need to do it. There are plenty of leaders who take it seriously. I know I can name a dozen off the top of my head who do just an awesome job developing talent, and business case be damned, they're going to do it. Like they'll make their organization do it because they believe in the mission, right? On the business side, even with AI, right? Expensive people are expensive. And that sounds like a dumb thing to say, right? Because it's obvious, but the way I come from a services background, and the way we calculate people's costs is we add on multiples onto salary, right? So we take someone's base salary and we understand their benefits cost this, and their overhead applied to this person cost this, and we add that up and we get to a total cost, right? And that's just it's not just a services like quirk, right? Like that's how you calculate the cost of people. So when you're starting from a high base salary and you're figuring cost, like expensive people get really expensive really fast when you add on their benefits, when you add on the cost of overhead. Like PTO for an expensive person is a lot more expensive than the same PTO package for a young person, et cetera. So to me, it will never make sense, even in the age of AI, to have expensive people doing cheap work. Because I keep hearing that. It's like, well, we'll hire one senior, we'll give them AI, and we'll have them do monkey work like the juniors used to do. And it's like, at the end of the day, even with AI, like you have a senior person burning expensive hours doing monkey work. Like, yes, it's less hours because it's AI, but it's still hours, right? And I just don't, when I've kind of run the math, the numbers in my head, I've never seen where it makes sense for a senior person, like you bring in a junior person, give them AI and train them, they are going to be much cheaper than that mid-level senior person. You'll free them up to do that task. So for me, that's the business case. Nobody in security likes to do it. A lot of people in security are individual contributors in the security side forced into a management role. So like developing staff, managing juniors, like that's not something they really want to do. We kind of got to just get over it. Like we got to learn those skills. We got to learn how to hire people and bring them in. And I think about the industries that do this well. So like if you think about medicine, right? So we bring in radiology techs and entry-level nurses all the time, right? And we don't kill people. And so if we can bring in people into like life-threatening situations that are really important, and we can train people who don't know how to do this, and we can make it work without killing people, like we could do it in cybersecurity. Like it's not that hard. Like most cybersecurity jobs really aren't that hard. A mid-level person can design a AI schema and training set to bring in entry-level people and do work and be cheaper than they would ever be doing that low-level SOC stuff, vulnerability analysis, closures, things, the kind of things juniors used to do in the old ages before we got excited about AI. And so to me, that business case is clear. Like cheap people are cheap and expensive people are really expensive.
Yeah, well, for sure. And I think a lot of people underestimate how productive somebody kind of junior level that has the right motivators and sense of self-motivation and genuine interest in the field and technological affinity, being AI native, like people can figure things out very, very quickly if they're sufficiently intelligent and sufficiently motivated. You just got to think about it a little bit more creatively, I guess. What can we set this person up to start working on today to where they can get ramped up pretty quickly? And ideally with minimal oversight, but as you'd mentioned, it's going to require some. I mean, I almost feel like part of the shortcomings of the next generation are going to be more communication styles and understanding company hierarchies and company politics and stuff like that. People that grew up in, just a smartphone era, basically. They've had a smartphone in their hands since they were 11 years old. They're probably pretty good with technology, but they may not be as good with people. So, yeah. Well, and that's why I tend to favor the idea. Sorry, go ahead.
That's good. And that's trainable, right? I don't like the idea that those things aren't trainable, because that tends to be, actually, I'm about to put up a post about that in like a week or so, right? Because it's like we have this idea that there's these mythical skills that we can't teach people on like the personality side and the communication side. And I just think it's BS, right? So I was incompetent at those things when I started. So I had zero social self-confidence. I was clueless about industry. I would walk into a room and be completely lost. And it's like, that's just what it means to be a junior. And so we recognize that juniors add value, particularly because they're cheap and they are high energy, right? And if I was given AI tools as a junior, I would have been a superstar, man. Like if I had access to the capabilities I have now, just even with just a basic chatbot LLM, like forget agents, like it would have supercharged my career as a junior. Like I would have gotten up learning curve so much faster. And had I had good management on top of having AI, so somebody who, helped me, show me the ropes, gave me a little bit of structure, put me in a safe box to like where I could experiment pretty freely without hurting things, but still be productive to the organization. Like just good management of entry level people plus LLMs. It's the possibilities are amazing, right? To an organization that wants to grasp this and drive some cost reduction in their security team without hurting operations at all.
For sure. Well, and I've certainly seen the dilution of billable hours and trying to cut down on those employee costs, especially across the big four with the private equity influence coming in lately. They're making the organizations a lot less top heavy than they would have been, 10, 15 years ago. Not nearly as many partners, a lot more senior consultants and junior consultants, and a lot more offshoring too. So that's also been interesting to watch. What innate characteristics do you think good employees have that can't be trained? You mentioned a lot of the communication styles and that sort of thing can be trained. Is there anything that can't be trained? Maybe, motivation or work ethic or something like that? I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
I don't think there's anything that can't be developed. I really truly believe that, right? I've seen completely unmotivated people turn highly motivated with great leadership, and I will raise my hand and say that I've been one of them, right? I have been in environments that just sucked, right? And so I am just like, the last thing I want to do is do anything right now. Like, I'm just going to sit here and stare at my screen, right? And I'm a go-getter type of guy, but like I've had stretches especially in my 20s and 30s, like when I was still figuring out where, with crappy management, things not working right. Like I've been a demotivated person not doing something. So like, I don't even know if motivation isn't trainable. Like, you put people in the right environment with the right leadership, like you can get out of them. You can get great work out of people. I guess you can't, like, you can lead a horse to water, right? So you can't always make them drink. So like sometimes you can put, people in the best situation possible and you give them great leadership and they still don't perform. And like, that is a reality, but I think that's sort of the exception rather than the rule. Like, I don't think there's a lot that can't be taught. I can't say I can't make everybody a genius, but I can make everybody, I think I can make anybody meaningfully, at least minimally productive given their skill set, with the right leadership and the right environment. I can't do that for everybody. Obviously, I'm not going to gel. Like, plenty of people aren't going to adapt to my leadership style. Plenty of people aren't going to adapt to the types of organizations I try to build. But I think there is an organization for everybody out there. There are definitely things that make it easier, though, right? So like, self-motivation is great. Again, but not, I think people are less self-motivated than they realize, right? Like, some people are completely unmotivated before their first cup of coffee. So it's like, are you asking them pre or post coffee if they're self-motivated? But I really don't. I think you can develop traits in anybody. It takes time. Sometimes the business case isn't there. Like, it's not worth it to take the time that it needs. But I think we need to look, as leaders, we need to look hard at ourselves before we kind of blow somebody off as just not having it. And I want to say, I kind of learned this from the Army. So I worked for a company with two ex-Army guys, run by two ex-Army guys. And I was not in the military, but it was really interesting watching them work. And then I saw that in the Army generally when I worked with more Army folks. It's like, when we had an underperforming employee, we had to try everything, right? It was not just, our person's underperforming, like, get rid of him. It was like, it is your responsibility to make this person perform. Like, you have to try every single thing at like the absolute limits of your creativity to figure out how to fix this person and help them be their best until you can say it's on them and they're out, right? So it's like, even when we'd come to them with underperforming people that we thought needed to be let go, and they'd be like, I don't think you've tried everything yet. Like, you haven't tried everything to make this work. And like, I learned that in the Army, because you don't always get the best recruits in the Army, and the Army turns them into soldiers, right? And there's you get a huge diversity of people, huge diversity of backgrounds, huge diversity of intelligence in the Army, and like, they make people work, right? And so like, that was their attitude, and I've tried to adopt that in my own leadership, right? Like, if somebody's not working out, like, I need to take a hard look at myself, and I need to take another hard look at myself, and then I need to look in the mirror, and then I need to hard look at myself again before I decided that it's something innate about that person, because 9 times out of 10 you can fix it.
Yeah, well, I certainly think everybody has their own things that get them out of bed in the morning, and they may not always be obvious to the untrained observer. I spent a lot of time as a recruiter. I would say the majority of my time in my recruiter screens talking to people about their motivators. Whether it's money, not my favorite motivator in most roles, except for maybe sales, or they just really love the work, or they're in the case of a lot of DFIR folks, especially, they would always be very, they wanted to be the good guys and, fighting evil, essentially, but those sorts of things really can change the way somebody reacts to things. And Yeah, to your point, not everybody's built the same way, but I think if you dig deep enough with your employees, you possibly can find that one thing that sparks their interest, that generates enthusiasm that maybe you never saw before. I can tell you in my example, I'm extremely intrinsically motivated, where I just want to do a good job. Like I want to be the best at what I do, and that's my motivator. But I think for a lot of folks, it may be external rewards, that sort of thing. But the thing that I had a boss where basically it crushed my motivation as somebody who's intrinsically motivated, when they decided to try to extrinsically motivate me by making me fill out timesheets of what I was doing every 15 minutes. Um, that was the quickest way to lose my loyalty and hardworkingness that I was naturally, bent to do. So, um, yeah, some people need that direction, but other people, if they get all of that micromanagement, it just crushes their spirit, and you won't get the best out of them. What about retention? I think that kind of relates to some of what we've been talking about. Trying to hold on to people. Maybe they are relatively happy, but there's a lot of opportunity out there. Maybe you hired that perfect product security person. What do you think you can do to hold on to that person once you have them on board, especially if they're expensive?
Yeah, it's individual, right? You just got to take the time to take the time to understand each of your individual employees, right? You got to understand why they're there. They all have different reasons, and you can work with anything. Like actually, truthfully, I don't mind money motivated people, because money motivated people, I'll tell you what, they end up being pretty cheap, because like a money motivated person, like to an extra $10 is great. Like you give them an extra $10, like they're happy, right? Somebody who's not motivated by money, they might need an extra 100K, because like it's just you got to pile it on before they get motivated by money, and that's an easy lever to pull. So money motivation doesn't bother me, but you just have to notice, you got to recognize what it is about the people, and you have to build relationships. Because I kind of believe that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses. And we have extremely high retention at 38 North because we've got a great culture. We've got a wonderful boss. Like he sets this very human culture. He's very relaxed. He's driven without bringing like a whole bunch of extra stress onto the people in the organization. Like he's very easy to talk to, and people respond to that, and they get a whole bunch of loyalty because of that. And it's the same with our managers. Like our managers take those cues, build the personal relationships with the people that they manage, with the people they work with. And I think when you build that culture, people don't want to leave. They might, right? There are always great opportunities, but like you want it to be hard for them, right? It's like you want them to feel like they're breaking up with you, and that it's sad when they leave, because they love you and they love the team they work for. And I think that's to me the key with retention. I don't think it's benefit packages. I mean, who really talk like most people but I guess I've known people who do, but most people don't like dollars and cents benefit packages and compare them precisely across organizations. I mean, salary is great, sure, but so is work from home. There are benefits, but at the end of the day, it's about building a team and building a group of people that genuinely like each other and believe in what you're trying to do. Most people aren't going to want to leave that, but retention is personal. That's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. If I think back to the hiring managers I've worked with over the years that I really appreciated working with the most, it was the ones that most genuinely cared about their people, and that they tended to be more servant leader types versus authoritarian, I guess would be the best way to put it. They'd actually take time to get to know their people, and that would engender a sense of loyalty, where the way I say it is like basically your employees would slay dragons for you. That could be created, I guess, by like taking a chance on somebody who was a non-traditional fit for your open role. That's or building up entry level folks. That's one of the best ways to get loyal employees, is to build them yourself and care about them and mentor them. And yeah, you get great retention that way. And like you said, it's an individual thing. For some people, it could just be as simple as, hey, I just need to be able to take my kid to the doctor's office during the day without somebody jumping down my throat. So flexibility, remote work, I think those are big as well. So what do you think about what the industry is doing right and wrong on the hiring front right now? Like, obviously, if you post a job, there's 1,000 applicants within a week. What are we doing right and wrong right now?
Well, doing wrong, we're not. I think a huge part of the flood of applicants is just people's desperation to either grab a job in cybersecurity, make a transition into cybersecurity from another tech role, or find a more stable position because everybody's kind of scared in tech right now. So when jobs come up, like it costs essentially nothing to apply. It's pretty easy, particularly in the age of AI. It's easy to fire them off. So people spray and pray. I think what I would like if I was a CISO hiring, right? I would build a relationship with trusted universities, right? So I would for the entry level, right? And that's great. Entry level or graduate students. And I find that pipeline to be really effective. You build a relationship with a few leaders at the university who can help you identify up and coming talent. You nurture those people early. You identify them. You give them internships. So you're not even having to go on the open market, right? Like you're working with a trusted pool of people at the junior level. At the mid level, to me, it's about benchmarking companies and actively recruiting. It's people like you, right? Like I don't want to. In this day and age, I don't want to put up a role for actually probably even a mid-level, but I definitely don't want to try to hire a senior level cybersecurity person on my own. Like I want to go to somebody like you and I want to have specific companies I'm interested in. Companies matter, right? Or at least industry sectors. Like there are certain industry sectors that just in general, as a rule of thumb, do awesome in security. Like they've got really cool technology. They've got great approaches to compliance. They're really modernized. And it's some industries you don't necessarily think of. And so like I would probably go to someone like you on the high level and I'd say, look, like I'm targeting people in these types of companies or these types of industries with these types of experiences. Go help me find them rather than throwing an unlikely crappy job ad up on LinkedIn and getting bombarded, right? Like it's much more of a sniper game now at the high level, picking off the people you really want. And I think the best way is active recruiting in industries and companies that you really want to go grab people out of. Mid-level is always interesting, right? So because we talked about senior level, we talked about junior. Mid-level is one where maybe job ads apply a little bit more, but I think security is really not that hard. It just isn't. Like day-to-day security work, there are exceptions. There are really hard jobs, like we talked about product security, but like most day-to-day security roles really aren't that hard. But I think recruiting of the mid-level out of people who don't necessarily have a security background, because as we've noticed, like our entry-level hiring is pretty attenuated. Grabbing DevOps people make great security people. People with sysadmin experience tend to make great security people. So at the mid-level, I really like those career transitioners. So if I had to say it's on the entry level, it's not just putting out job ads. It's having leaders that build relationships with the people who are producing entry level people. And I think the best source of that is universities. I think it's working with recruiters at the senior level to be much more strategic about the types of people you bring in. And at the mid level, it's figuring out how to transition people from other areas of tech into security, since like our entry level pipeline's pretty low to begin with.
Yeah, and there's just so many amazing people in the market, and at any given time, I almost foresee a future in the near future where a lot of people are going to just be dropping out of their dream, basically, of entering into the security realm. Those sysadmins that are brighter network engineers that just they're applying to all these roles, not hearing anything back. But to your point about the senior folks, absolutely, I think most modern hiring breaks down because internal recruiters and HR managers, they're relying too much on the post and pray method of recruiting. We just post up a job, see what we get. We're not targeting the people that we know the hiring manager wants, because half the time they don't know what the hiring manager wants. So they just put up the posting and then screen the applicants. But you also have to know what you're screening for too. And it takes a long time to develop a specialization in recruiting where you truly understand all the terminology for any even sub-discipline of security. Like DevSecOps has its whole lexicon that's so much different than GRC or DFIR. There's just so many terms to know and acronyms, and it can be difficult to recruit for something that you haven't spent months or years recruiting for previously. So yeah, but ideally, to your point, I think recruiters should be going more outbound, not posting and praying. I think it's largely a waste of everybody's time. If 1% of the people that apply to jobs actually hear something back, that means 99% are hearing nothing and they're wasting their time. So
yeah, and if I was looking at my current level, like I don't think I'd be doing much applying. I'd be working my network, which I mean, people obviously have to do. But look, on the mistake side, the biggest mistake we made though is that we really don't know and I think we have to be gentle with ourselves. Like security is really new. So we don't, it's existed in an organized fashion for about 30 years. In reality, like we've only been doing this at a highly professional level for like 15, maybe 20. It's not, it's a new field, right? And so we don't know how to develop talent. We don't really know how to manage. And a lot of security people don't want to manage. And so the number one mistake is that hiring is fine, like whatever. You got to manage these people and develop them and make them work in your organization once you get in. And there are certain disciplines that are elite at that, like doctors. The medical field in general is just wonderful at bringing people in and getting them integrated into ways of doing things in disciplines that are really hard. But like also critical infrastructure. You hire a brand new person to run a water treatment plant, right? Like we have defined methods for getting these people up to speed to be able to run the water treatment plant effectively. Same with power plants. If we can hire junior line operators, like it's not a lot more dangerous than going and grabbing high wire lines, right? But like we have mechanisms for like teaching these people. We know how to manage them. Like we've been doing this for 100 years. We don't do that in cybersecurity. And so that as you're thinking about hiring, you also have to think about leadership and management. I mean, the people that are going to be taking these new employees, they have to know what they're going to do with them. They have to know how to teach them. They have to know how to onboard them. And as a whole, as an industry, we're really bad at that. Like we mostly hire people and we're like, yeah, you're the log guy, go figure it out. Or it's like, yeah, you're the Qualys guy, like go figure out our scanning, right? It's like, it works for certain people, but it's not optimal. And even for people who are really good at like being dropped in to go figure things out, like they can do it, but it's not an optimal way to manage people. And that's a big thing we're doing wrong. So you gotta know how to manage people and know how to slot people in. Would make a big difference, I think, in hiring, because then we'd probably hire more people once we figured out we were good at it, that we got benefit from having these people, that it was actually cost effective. Like we'd get better, particularly at the junior level of doing this.
Right. Well, and it strikes me that if you look at the example of doctors, for instance, the pathway to becoming a doctor is extremely regimented. It's very well defined. It's it's been around for a very long period of time. So there's a system there where I wonder if security, it's a lot more difficult because just the sheer pace of change is insane. I mean, of course, there are advances in medicine, but not to the degree that attacks are evolving in security, and how AI is complicating everything. It's like it almost seems like the key trait that you would need to have is adaptability, and I've talked about that before, but I wonder if that's something that you can actually screen for. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's easy to overstate what's changed, right? The fundamentals are still the same, right? So and I saw some like hyperbolic posts about Mythos, which it's been funny with Mythos, right? Because it's like 4 people have actually got to play with it, and then everybody has an opinion on this. But it was like there's essentially not going to be a need for cybersecurity people anymore because it finds vulnerabilities so well. And it's like that's kind of backwards, right? Most cybersecurity people are not running around finding vulnerabilities. Most cybersecurity people, like myself included, like we're plumbers, right? Like we go fix things that are broken. And so the process for doing that has not changed from the day I started to now, right? We have some cooler tools, right? We have some great ways of analyzing data, like a modern SIM. Like for my managed security services days, like we were in like crappy SIMs running these like really essentially glorified SQL queries to kind of try to figure out what was going on our network, to now to have the kind of data visualization and analysis tools that you can get out of a modern SIM. Like that's awesome. But like the mechanics of it haven't changed, right? Like what we look for, what we search for, what we alert on, like what we're worried about, like all that's still the same. Patching is still the same. It's just that everything's gotten harder. So it's like, when everything gets harder, when you go from, high school JV to varsity to D1 ball to the NFL, right? Like the big thing that changes is the speed, right? And when the speed changes, the fundamentals have to be even stronger. So I think you're definitely right in that we don't train the fundamentals well enough because we don't even agree on what they are. And so like, to me, as I'm also an educator, so I'm an adjunct professor at Cleveland State University teaching cybersecurity. I spend a lot of time thinking about what the fundamentals are because I need my JV athlete that's going to make the leap to varsity and hopefully D1 and then hopefully the NFL to have those fundamentals because they don't change, right? Like running a route is running a route. You just have to run it faster and smarter, The basic blocks are the same. The formations are the same. It's just they happen faster, crisper, harder, and the enemy's hitting you a lot faster and harder too. And so I think a lot about that. And I wish we as an industry would come together to figure out what fundamentals actually matter, because I don't think anything that's happening in AI changes what those fundamentals are. It just speeds everything up.
Makes sense. So what would you say the fundamentals are then? Because that's one of the things I hear often from hiring managers that are pushing back on the idea of hiring somebody junior is, well, they don't understand the fundamentals. They couldn't tell me what a network protocol is or that sort of thing. So what do you think people need to have coming out of some of these programs to be at least um, to have a baseline to be employable in security?
Sure. So it's a great question. And it's really frustrating on the education side because I went through an effort where I went and interviewed a bunch of major hirers when I was redoing my intro to cybersecurity class. And I was trying to find commonalities among hiring. Like I was going to my vision was I was going to nail down some things that these people care about. I was going to tailor my course to it. And I was going to make my final exam like a mini certification exam where it's like, if you do well on my final exam, like you're cleared in the fundamentals that these organizations said they wanted, and I couldn't find any commonality. It was all over the place, right? I think the way I do it is I start with how the internet works. Like a lot of security people just don't understand the basics of it. So forget networking. Like it's fine. Like understanding IP addresses and networking is great, but like if you don't understand how the internet works, how DNS works, how BCP works, like how even just how fiber optic cables send signals across from one continent to another. Like there's something about understanding that and understanding that foundation that has opened my students' minds to how the rest of this works. Because at the end of the day, to launch a cyber attack or to defend against it, you're sending packets across the internet, and you got to understand how that works. From the internet into an organization, you have to understand how most organizations are structured. And I've worked with hundreds of them. They're usually structured the same. They all think they're little special like little snowflakes, but in reality, there's a whole ton of commonality behind them. And so understanding the basics of how organizations build and design networks. So part of that is networking. Everyone always talks about, oh, you got to understand networking, but like, yes and no, but like, you really have to know how to do IP addressing by hand. Like I make my students do it just because like it's a good practice, but ultimately that's pretty easy. What is hard is understanding the big picture of how an identity provider provides access to these servers and how this subnet talks to this subnet and how organizations use VPNs and how monitoring works in a modern SOC. Like you have to understand the big picture of how these pieces work together. And it's not even a technical thing. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of technical skill involved in that, but it's mostly just understanding the big picture because it's amazing you can get kids that, they wrote a really cool open source project, right? They're great at coding and like they, passed various security certifications, but they just have no idea how security sits in an organization, what they usually do, what tools they use, what they talk to, what trade-offs they have to make. So like getting people an understanding about modern IT works in an organization is critical. I think it's really important to be hands-on with vulnerability management as you're learning security. So like there's something about running scans, seeing vulnerabilities and having to fix them and then not being able to fix them that really opens my students' eyes to the challenges of cybersecurity. Like they see why this is hard. It's like scans, hard to read. Patching, can't always do it. Vulnerabilities, they build up over time and it gets overwhelming and like, oh my God, like I haven't fixed everything from last week's scan and now I have more on this week's scan. Like understanding that process is critical because like that's so much of the work that like day-to-day real security people do. Not people publishing awesome exploits on LinkedIn, but I'm talking about the people who actually do real security work like deep in organizations. They're usually chasing around putting out vulnerability related fires. Like that's critical. I do the same thing on web app, like understanding how web applications work. Like, because most of my students are going to go into an organization that provides some form of service through a website, whether that's selling stuff or whether that's because hardcore in the cloud, like they're going to be doing that. You have to understand how websites are architected. So not necessarily a security question specifically, but like how organizations design websites, how they maintain them, what the trade-offs are between different languages. Like you have to understand that too. I think cloud is really important. So like understanding the basics of cloud computing and why that is different than on-prem. It's not just servers in somebody else's data center. Like there are things about cloud security that make it unique. And I add on a little bit of programming. So I don't, especially in the age of AI, like I was trying to improve my own programming skills. And eventually I decided I gave up because I will never write code as good as AI. There are plenty of software developers who will, right? I'm not a very good software developer. Like most of my career has been writing crappy little scripts to do things, right? And AI can do that really well. But like, I want my students to be able to write the crappy little scripts, just so they understand. There's something about like understanding how to put together a Python script, or in my day it was Perl, like learning how to do Perl scripting. That helps you understand how computers work. So if I had to pick a couple foundational things, like that's sort of what my intro class looks like. There's some other modules built in there too, but like I want them to walk in understanding like the basics of each one of those areas, and I think from there they can build.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and a great summary. I mean, one thing I really took away from that is the big picture. For any entry-level person I talk to, they're reaching out to me as a recruiter, not understanding how we work. Like, we have to have the right job to really be of help to them. But I try and impart some wisdom wherever I can. Inevitably, their question is always, what certification should I get next? What technical skill do I need to have? They're not thinking about big picture stuff, how to solve problems for an organization, how organizations work. And I feel like some of that stuff you would just almost have to pick up on the job. It sounds like you're doing a great job in your class of imparting that wisdom and sharing like real world examples of how this stuff plays out. But I don't know, I get the sense that for most programs, that's not really the case. And people are coming to the market unprepared.
Yeah, it's modeled off computer science. So here's the problem so computer science got warped because it ended up being software development, right? And computer science is more than software development, but most computer science programs were building people that were ultimately going to be software developers. And so that became a center of gravity that those programs gravitated towards. And the thing about being a software developer is that you don't have to understand the big picture. The best ones do, but as an entry-level coder, pre-AI particularly, you could get plopped in front of a computer, you could get handed requirements, and you would code, right? And you didn't have to understand the big picture. That was somebody else's job. Your job was to be able to you were minimally useful if you could take requirements from somebody and you could write decent code, and you could get it through testing and deployment. And we train cybersecurity people the same way. It's like we produce these kids that, like, man, they can do a CFT, right? They can write an exploit based on a vulnerability. They can come up with Python scripts, right? Great scripts to do various automation things. Like they really over-index on that. But so like cybersecurity, like that stuff's almost the easy part. Like when you get into a job, the hard part is all the different trade-offs you have to do, understanding how IT works, like what does and doesn't work. Like that's the really hard part. And that's what makes junior cyber employees dangerous, is when they come into that role and like they don't get the big picture, and it's like they're bulls in China shops. Your coder, like, they don't get the big picture. Like, they're not going to screw anything up because they're writing to requirements. Your junior cybersecurity person who's supposed to be writing policy, if they don't understand how the various different parts of the organization work together, or at least if they don't have an analytical framework to figure it out for their specific organization, like, they're going to cause some damage. And I think that's one of the challenges with entry-level hiring. We teach them the wrong way.
It's almost interesting. I could see sort of an analogy to AI. You're almost describing the difference between narrow and general intelligence there. Big picture being general intelligence, and figuring out how things relate to each other, and not just focusing on a narrow set of tasks and being really good at that one task. Well, and that's where AI and automation is coming in to replace those tasks now. Anything that's repetitive or like a single task oriented thing, that's now not necessary to have people for the most part. So you almost have to, like you said earlier, the bar is being raised consistently for everybody, and not just the junior folks, but also senior folks, to think on a larger scale, broader picture, more strategic. I think, not necessarily leaders, though, because it seems like there's less leadership hiring these days. I don't know. Maybe that's just my anecdotal experience from browsing LinkedIn all day. But yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. So yeah, we're actually coming up on time here, Spence. So just one last question for you. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
Yeah, the pending retirement. Like, that's a big, I feel like we get hyper focused on the talent gap, but we don't realize necessarily that a lot of great people are going to be leaving this industry soon. So the people who started this industry are going to be rolling out, right? And like, they've been our most reliably employed people, right? They've been the most skilled. They have the biggest picture. They know the histories. A lot of them have been tenured at their organizations for a long time. And we're like the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to lose a lot of them. And if we had a pipeline of junior talent, like that wouldn't worry me so much. But there's so much hero ball in cybersecurity where it's like we're not managing people in accordance with like discipline frameworks. We're just kind of making it up as we go. And like those people are essential to making it up as we go. And so we haven't thought enough about what that cliff is going to look like when we lose these people. We might lose them faster than we expect because of AI. So I know people that have accelerated their retirement plans. Cybersecurity is a lucrative field. There are a lot of people in their 50s that have, made enough that they're going to be able to get by, right? So, and they're just like, you know what, this is too much, I'm out. And so I think AI is accelerating this. It was always going to be a problem, and AI is making it a little bit worse, because eventually farming goats starts to sound a lot better than dealing with cybersecurity. And we're not talking about it enough.
For sure. Yeah, I always view it as a succession planning problem. Nobody's thinking about the people we need to bring up behind the folks that are retiring. So great points. People want to reach out to you. What's the best way to do so?
Look me up on LinkedIn. That's kind of the best way to find me. I'm pretty responsive on there, and I look forward to chatting with you.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for your time, Spence. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thanks, Pete.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.